Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 220 of Retro Power Uncut. And we're back in the workshop, and pretty obviously, and we're going to start with the Aston Martin. Actually, no, we're going to start with the noise in the background, which is the paint booth. And quick little bit of background, so you know, like the feel of everything that's going on here. 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, lose track, when we first came back in the new year, we'd had a bit of trauma with our paint booth. We obviously do all our own maintenance for the bulk of things, and you'll have seen Martin in the background. I've mentioned Martin previously, ex-Leaping Cats, our third ex-Leaping Cats employee. He was the fabrication shop supervisor at Leaping Cats, and he's now basically our handyman. He works for us 3 days a week, doing maintenance and repairs and running around jobs and all sorts of things. And we had a bit of a crisis with the paint booth. Our extract fan failed on the paint booth. Well, I say failed, the bearings were making a horrendous noise. It's a big actual fan. The bearings were making a horrendous noise. I stripped it down and it had spun a bearing on the shaft. I built the shaft up, machined it back, put it all back together. But we had an issue with it, and it basically ate the shaft again. It just wasn't good enough. So we've made a new shaft, and I never mentioned that previous week. I know it's not that riveting and exciting, but it's fairly relevant, and it shows the sort of thing that goes on here and what can eat up bits of your day. And again, yeah, you could pay somebody else to do these things, but they charge even more than the time we've lost. You know, they charge far more than the time we've lost in the job. So James machined up a new shaft for that fan out of some 30mm diameter EN16T material, put the keyways in it, put the grub screw recesses in it, put the step on the end, drilled and tapped it, and we got the fan rebuilt, got all that back together, great. So the booth's now running nice and quietly, not making a right racket in the background on camera. We'll come to why it's running in a bit with Mark, but yesterday another background problem came to a head, which is that we have had an issue with being unable to control the pressure accurately on the booth. For those unfamiliar with how a paint booth works, there's an intake fan and an extract fan, and the two airflows from those two fans must be balanced. If you have too much positive pressure in the booth, it pushes all your isocyanate vapours out into the workshop and kills us all, which we don't want. And too lower pressure, and it sucks all of the dust in from the workshop and puts dust in all your paintwork, which we also don't want. So you have to keep them very, very accurately balanced, and to do that there's a set of balancing louvers and an actuator motor, and that had all seized up for some reason. So this morning, planned out my day with some accuracy, that I was going to, first thing this morning, before I got any other things put on my plate, get into the control panel for the booth, test everything out, check all the wiring in there and find out why that motor wasn't working. So I did a fault find on all of that, got all the way through, found that actually the problem was that the control louvers had actually seized due to overspray build-up. So we freed all that off, got all that working, that's now great. But in the process of that, I stopped the lights working in the paint booth, which was an exciting moment because we needed it working. And in delving into all that, I hit on the classic problem of using tradespeople to do jobs. In this case being our friendly, previously mentioned a few years ago, exceptional high quality booth installers who I wouldn't trust to assemble a wheelbarrow, I don't think, and discovered another little perler they'd left, which was that in going in the panel to buzz out some of the wiring for the pressure controls, I must have nudged a wire which wasn't actually tightened into its terminal blocks. And I discovered that the two neutral wires for the lighting in our booth, the terminal blocks for those were not done up. The wires were resting in them. Now, because they're only LED and they're light loading, they'd actually been working without a problem, but they'd never been done up. So that was a little joy to find, and top quality work there. So that's why we do it ourselves and don't trust anybody else to do it, because they're generally rubbish. So moving on from that rant, because it boils my blood, that kind of thing, that people can't be trusted to do a decent job of anything. Moving on from that, we're going to start on cars. So onto the Aston Martin DBS. I'm leaning on the car, but we're doing nothing with the car right this second. We keep saying we're going to blast it, We are going to blast it at the beginning of next week. There have been various delays in that process because Mark, who is going to blast this, has been very busy on other things, which we'll lead on to. However, there have been two avenues of progress. One, which I'll leave the CAD guys to talk about, and the second, which, coming back to talking about handyman Martin, conveniently, as well as being a handyman, he's also a jolly skilled sheet metal man. hence his previous role. So he's actually been carrying on in between his maintenance jobs with a little bit of progress on the roof for the Aston. Getting that smoothed out, taking out the highs and lows in it, and he's just got to do a bit of final blending in the wheel, and then I think he's pretty much got that ready to weld in. So he'll be about at the stage of being able to TIG weld that new roof repair section into the Aston's roof. Should be a really nice stage to be at. That's back burner stuff, there's no hurry, we're not in any great rush for that roof, but it's another job that's going to need doing and we may as well get it done. So Martin's been doing a little bit of work on that. He's just stopped because he was planishing using the slappers and dolly, which would have been making a bit of noise, so he stopped for the minute so that you can hear what I'm talking about and hear me waffle on and not hear clanging and banging with a hammer and dolly. But that's what's going on with the Aston. Moving on, we'll go on to Saab, which is a pretty challenging job going on at the moment. Bobby has his faithful gantry set up. This is actually Bobby's own kit, Bobby's own gantry. He's got this set up. He has had Luke print out these, which are sections. Let me put my drink down. These, which are 3D printed sections, printed in several pieces and glued together, representing what will be the new outer profile of the wing, the carbon fibre wing on this car. So that gives you an idea of how much wider the new bodywork will be versus the old on here. That's the profile of the wing, and this, I believe, if I get it the right way up, is possibly the profile of the door. So that gives you an idea of the door shut line. So that is what will be approximately the new outer profile of the car. Now I mentioned last week about the revisions being done to the hinges to allow us to move the hinge pivot centres outboard to enable us to move the door outboard. The requisite amount, not the actual door skin, we'll be moving a new outer skin outboard. The door frame will stay where it is, so the door shut still functions as it is, but we'll be moving the outer part, the skin of the door outboard, which means we also need to move the hinge centres outboard. Now, Trollhättan, as Jamie just reminded me a few moments ago as being the home of Saab, that is right, isn't it? It is Trollhättan, isn't it? No, that's not Volvo, is it? I might be getting myself terribly muddled here. I'm sure it is. I don't know quite what substances they had imbibed at the point of designing the original door hinges on this car. And I don't fully understand how they work, but they appear to have found some crazy compound angle for the door pivot pins in the hinges, which still enables the door to open without the hinges binding up. But they appear to not be on a common axis, and it's just mind-bending. I don't understand it, basically, and I don't like not understanding things, but I can't work out how the Saab door hinges work. Bobby has mounted them back up in the positions they were, and the door opens and shuts and does everything it should in the normal door position, and yet engineering and physics suggest to me those hinge pins shouldn't work because they appear to be in different axes and different planes. I have no idea how they work. I think it's because they're both angled and they're effective. I don't understand it. So somebody that knows Saab door hinges can explain it to me. I don't know how they bloody well work. But Bobby's attacking the problem with the brute force solution, basically, which is to simply build the hinges as they were and then offset everything by the distance we need to offset it, whilst keeping all of the other dimensions the same. So underneath this piece of plastic, he has built a pair of jigs which replicate the original positions of the hinges on the door, but move the actual whole assembly 40 millimeters outboard, but then allow him to space all of that back to the original position so he can retain the jig position and a new position for the hinge pivots. I hope I've kind of made some sense with explaining that. But that means that he can now fit the door as he has here, and it will shut into the original door shut, preserve the shut lines, shut as the original Saab door did, but then by removing two spacers, he can move this door into what would be its new hinge position, and that will replicate that position. And that's where it's all kind of slightly confusing. But he's basically made these spacers to enable the door to be in both of those positions and operate in both of the manners intended. Obviously, the actual door frame will continue to operate in the same plane that it's operating in now. It will be shutting to the same position it's operating to now, but the door outer skin will need to be out here, and the hinges will then need to allow that door to pivot in a manner that doesn't hit what is now the back of the wing. So it'll all make sense when it's together. I'm doing a really rubbish job of explaining this. I might try and get Bobby to explain it better than I am next week. But basically, we need to move the hinge pivot centres outboard by approximately 40 mil to allow the door to clear the wing. And that is not the work of 5 minutes. It's not an easy job on any car, but as I say, for some reason, the way the door hinges are configured on the Saab is just bonkers. It must have been a series of workarounds, but it makes absolutely no sense. And it's proving quite a challenge. But we'll get there. Bobby is beating it, and he pretty much has it beaten. I think at the stage he's at now, he has the somewhat jury-rigged hinge mechanisms in place, which are now going to allow him to build the new A-pillar. All of this is leading on to the being able to build a new A-pillar. And the A-pillar has to have room for the hinge receivers to be welded into it. To get the final adjustment, we're actually making the hinge receivers as loose pieces, which will fit into an oversized hole in the pillar. Then we can get everything jigged up, positioned, tack weld those hinge receivers in and make sure everything works before it becomes permanent. If we literally put the threaded inserts directly in the pillar to bolt the hinges to, and they're in the wrong places, we've got to cut the pillar to pieces again. Whereas if we make the hinge receivers with the threaded inserts in complete assemblies that socket into oversized recesses in that pillar, means we can tack weld them in place, check it, confirm, and then fully weld them, and we don't have to move anything again. So we've got a plan, quite a complicated plan, an enormous amount of work, and I'm not going to try and explain it any better than that, because it's pretty difficult to do without showing you every single step that's gone on, which we can't really do. Moving on to slightly different things, different end of the technology spectrum, of the science spectrum, but no less skilled, I hasten to add, E-Type. Now, the owner of this car visited yesterday and has been here again this morning, stayed overnight locally. We had something to eat with him last night, which was very pleasant. And he had a bit of a look at the car yesterday, and we had a good chat about various things. And then we went to see an engine builder yesterday who is likely to be entrusted with the build of the V12 for this car. I won't elaborate yet because the final decision isn't made, I don't believe, on that. But I will elaborate in the future, and we'll perhaps go and see the engine during build. If folks would like to see that, comment. We'll go to whichever engine builder is involved, and we'll go and have a look at the engine during the build. Interestingly, on the visit to that engine builder, we had a look at an ex-Jaguar Sport. In fact, I believe it belonged to Tom Walkinshaw, XJR15 engine, which was in build as well, which was quite nice to see. That was so again, hopefully we'll be able to do a little visit over to the engine builder if that all falls into place. But on the actual body of the car, as you can see, Matt's getting busy. Lead Dibner, as he was christened a while back, Matt is cracking on with the lead work. We've been mocking up some trial mirrors that Luke had formulated that you'll have seen last week. Been trialling those, working out what the customer was happy with, and we have a solution that the customer's happy with there. Matt's been just tying up a lot of little loose ends. The customer wanted to see the soft top in place, so Matt got that installed yesterday. That needs some modification to work with the revised body, but we put it on loosely so he could see what was going on there. Got the seats in place, again, so the customer could sit in, just check the pedal positions. We've got the pedal assemblies in, steering column in place, seats in place. Trialled all that, make sure everybody's happy. And as I say, Matt's now on to lead work, getting the B pillar area and sail panels all leaded into the door shut. He's done a little bit of welding to the back edge of the door, welded some 3mm wire down the back of the door to give us a bit more land for the seal to strike onto and close the door gaps up very slightly, which was a kind of semi-deliberate. Basically, it was deliberate. The actual final the solution we used in the end wasn't quite the initial plan, but we needed a bit more land for the door seal to sit onto, and that needed the door flange to be slightly bigger. There wasn't really a way around that because of the way the B pillar was constructed. Again, hard to explain without seeing all the individual sections. but that's now been solved by adding a little bit of material to the back of the door, which has worked very well. So as I say, mounts onto lead that side. It's going to do the lead work on the A-pillars. We had the radiator turn up today, so that will then unlock the next round of work with the nose cone, because that all really is hinging on having a radiator, which, as I say, has been somewhat delayed but has arrived today, but I think Carl might mention that. Another bit of progress this week actually on this car that I'd forgotten until just now is the rear hubs. We are moving this car to an outboard brake setup, which will be a hybrid of the E-type rear end plus the XJ40 onwards outboard uprights that we've talked about lots in the past. Similar setup to what we've done on the Churchill Jaguar. We have to do modifications on various parts for that to fit, but it does all fit. The complication is that this car is running wire wheels. I don't want to use bolt-on wire wheel hub adapters for a number of reasons. I'm not going to list them all now, but I don't want to use bolt-on adapters. I want to do an integral wire wheel hub to suit an XJ40 upright, which doesn't currently exist. Now, Austin Equipment are going to be making us those hubs. We're in a chicken and egg scenario between knowing what offset we want for the wheels and knowing exactly where the hubs are going to be. And the wheel manufacturer needs the details of the hubs, and the hub manufacturer needs the details of the wheels. So we're in a bit of a Mexican standoff there, but we have a solution, which is that the wheel manufacturer has now sent us a blank wheel centre, and that has now gone to Dave Wood at Austin Equipment, who is now going to use that to work out the final dimensions of the hubs. He's already done me some 3D printed ones to check that all of the other dimensions work, which they do, but he needs to do the final tweaks. He needed an actual wheel centre, which should be with him today. So then he can do the final work in making a 3D printed hub that should work with everything. Then he can actually make the final hubs for the back of this. That will then enable us to assemble a dummy, well, at least dummy assemble a rear end for it and double check the wheel offsets before we actually order the wheels, because as you imagine, they're not particularly cheap. So we need to make sure that they're correct before we go too far on that. Front end's fairly easy. That's basically standard E-type apart from brakes. But the rear is, we're going to outboard brake. I don't want to run the inboard brake setup. It's quite a powerful car. I suspect we're going to need some brake cooling on the back. So that's why we're going outboard brake. That pretty much wraps up where we're at on the E-type. Moving on from that, I suppose I can just gesticulate this way here now. On the XJC, Stu continues on the lots and lots of bits and bobs jobs on this. The key piece of progress this week so far has been the fuel installation in the back of the car. We are running twin fuel tanks, very similar to what the car originally had. They're just a slightly later version of what the car originally had. So saddle tanks inside the quarter panels, being filled from the original filler positions, which we talked about last week, modified fillers. But we have to modify the tank very slightly, change the outlet fittings on it. We want to balance the part, rather than having twin pumps and a switch to select the tanks and balancing the fuel load. Originally in these cars, you had to sort of balance your fuel use across the tanks on some of them. On other ones, they automatically drew from both tanks, but you had to fill them separately. They didn't really equalise themselves they didn't equalise themselves at a speed that would happen at a fuel station, so you still had to fill both sides of the car up from the fuel pump. What we've done previously on a previous one of these that we built is put an equaliser pipe in across the two tanks, which will equalise the fuel levels, give or take, as fast as you can fill it. So that works okay. We're going to put that equaliser pipe in and then tee off that to feed a low pressure fuel pump and then a surge tank and then a high pressure fuel pump, which is built into the surge tank along with the fuel pressure regulator, feeding a deadhead pressure rail at the front of the car. So all of that, so there's only a single fuel line running to the front, everything else is at the back. And all of that lot will hide in the spare wheel well, along with a space saver spare. So it's all neat and tidy out of the way in the boot. Doesn't add any great calamity to the back of the car, but neatens up the fuel installation and makes it a modern installation. We kind of know from the past that it worked pretty well. We're using a slightly different piece of equipment for the fuel pump on this one. We're using a Phytech, I think they're called, or F1 Tech or FI Tech fuel surge tank combined with high pressure pump combined with regulator unit. Just neatens everything up in the boot a little bit. So Stu's working on the plumbing to do with that and the access for the plumbing and the modifications to the fuel tanks needed to install all of that. He's also working on now, because he's had to park that for a bit because we've found some fittings that we haven't got, basically. So we've got some fittings on order that we haven't got at our local supplier. There's a particular fitting we need that they haven't got. So we're waiting for that. So he's now moved on to lower dash modification. We're deleting a few bits from the lower dash on the driver's side in this car, so he's modifying that at the moment, getting that complete and out of the way. We're done. And there's a couple of other jobs going on in the background. I'm bound to have forgotten something because there's so many little bits and bobs of jobs, but I think that we're getting towards the very final parts. I think we're within a couple of weeks or so of finished on dry build on this car now. It's very, very, very close. Because it's a relatively simple build, and because a lot of the parts are fairly well known to us, there's not too much more to do on this one. We're fairly confident on the dry build without having to dry build every single little detail of it. So yeah, it's coming together pretty well now. Moving on from that, I've been doing a bit of work actually. I'll talk about the thing I've been doing. It's over there, there's probably not much point me. Actually no, we'll walk over there. We'll walk over there. For the Churchill Jaguar next door, we had some brass window surrounds to do, which we talked about probably about 12 months ago, I imagine, a long time ago. Parked them on the back burner because they weren't stopping anything getting done. But we're just getting to the point now where they are going to stop things being done, so I've had to pick that job up. Now, some time ago, I ordered, to pick up some props here, some brass extrusion from a supplier. I can't even remember who from now. So that's some brass extrusion, U-channel. And then this is the hinge mechanism that the Churchill Jaguar uses. It's the same as a Mark II Jaguar rear window hinge mechanism, which is an extruded piece of brass with a tadpole sort of head on it, which works with an adjustable clamp to give you effectively a continuous piano hinge setup for the rear window to hinge in. However, I cannot get from anywhere a channel section to match that channel. I could machine it, but that's a ridiculous way of solving the problem. So what I elected to do is slim down that channel section and make it into a piece that I could braze into the back of a bigger piece of channel section. Another prop needed. So what I did is slim down a piece of the original piano hinge section by cutting the back off it and making it like that. And then machine a groove into the back of one of the new channel sections. And then that can solder, and I'm just going to soft solder that into the back of there, and I then generate a big channel section that hinges in the same way. So that does that. Next thing, when Stu did the metalwork on the car, he made an MDF template for the rear window, which is close to correct. It's pretty close. It needs the odd tweak, but what we've done to tweak that a bit is actually scan the rear window apertures on the car and then blend the two in CAD to give us a single profile that's pretty close, and then chop that profile out on the CNC plasma out of some 6mm steel plate like that. And then what I've done is bolt that down to this table on here. I'm not going to do it, that's bolted down to there, and then I can shape the brass channel around it, which is what I've done there. So that has been heated and bent around that piece of steel, like that, effectively. It actually slides over it. It fits perfectly over there. It slides onto there like that. So that's been shaped around that. And then what will happen is that's going to be mited and cut into that front section with the hinge brazed into it, sorry, that way around, with the hinge brazed in. This will be removable on two removable corner pieces like these two here. And it means we can then take that apart to get the glass in. The glass will be bonded into that. That back piece will be screwed on. The corners will be mited. And then we have rear opening hinged quarter window, which now fits our lowered roof, two-door converted Jaguar Mark II Coupe. So that's what I've been doing. Moving on from that, I'm going to hand over to Mark. Now, I noticed in the comments last week particularly, a few people being a bit critical of Mark's presenting style. And we all come over differently on camera, and it's an interesting thing that we don't employ Mark for his acting skills or his talking on camera skills. But he's volunteered to do that on camera here, and that's it. You know, we haven't twisted his arm. We've mentioned to everybody here that we'd like them all to do bits on camera if they want to. They're more than welcome to. But a lot of people are quite camera shy and don't particularly want to varying degrees. But Mark said he'd do it, and that's quite nice because I like to get everybody involved. But as I say, he's not an actor, and he's not here for his talking on camera abilities. He's here because he's a grafter. He's worked for us since, I can't actually remember what year he started. He had a brief trip away. He actually moved to France for a little while, and he had a few life changes occur. I'm not going to elaborate on all of them. He had a few life changes occur. He was away for a bit in France. He actually moved back, and when he moved back, he asked whether he could come back, and we said yes. He's absolute grafter of the team. So he's back here doing what he did basically before he left. But he's been with us, other than that short blip, since the very, very early days of the business. I can't remember precisely when he started, but certainly less than 2.5 years into the business's starting. Mark's been here since then. So he's a real mainstay member of our team, and he's a very hard-working guy. And yes, you may not particularly like his style of presenting on camera, but that's just how Mark is. He's a really lovely guy to have around, and I appreciate the fact that he's happy to talk on camera and explain what's going on in the paint shop. So, on that note, over to Mark, and I'll let him talk about what's been going on this week, because it's quite exciting.
All right, welcome back to another week. I told you I'd get it painted. Jamie's doing a little montage now in the background probably while we're talking. Yeah, I spent all day yesterday on this. It's a long day because I had to start with the sealer coat, which is a white primer to seal the whatever underneath we do. So just in case you got some flatting marks, what you couldn't quite get out with the 400. Bang the sealer coat on. That seals everything in nicely. We put it on with a 1.3 gun because it's thinned down to 30% thinner, so it will like flash off nearly like a base coat would, so you got no peel. Just got to be careful you don't get a run, because if you get a run, that's a bad day. You got to let it dry, we've got to flat it out, start again. But yeah, that all went smoothly. And then I came in, well, you'll see me mixing the paint. It's water-based, so I have to, say if I put 1,000 millilitres in, well, a litre, I have to then put 30% of the aqua, like a water thinners. So I put 30% of that in, give it a good mix, bang it in the gun through a filter first to get all the crud and that out of it. Come in, I had to do a drop coat over the whole car. As you'll see, well, I don't think, you'll see that on the GoPro. That's just like a grip coat. It looks really patchy on the first coat. Let that dry for 10 minutes with the blowers on, because like water-based needs like air blowing on it to dry it out. Heat doesn't really do it. It will, but it will take about an hour. But we have the heat and the blowers on it. So then I came in, smashed a full coat on it, let that dry for 15 minutes because it's more heavier with the blowers on again. I do 2 more coats of that, let that dry, then I come in with a drop coat then, that makes it uniformed, metallic, so you've got no patches, because when you're banging it on wet, it'll push the metallic about, and if you've got a silver or a grey car, you will see it, the patches in it. But this, you probably wouldn't see it, but you'd see it in some sunlight. So what we do, I'll come out to about here, away, so you're just dusting it on really. Drop the gun down to 1.5 bar from 2 bar. Do that over the whole car. Then we let the car all dry for about 20 minutes, give it a quick little bake at 30 degrees, bang the blowers back on, cool the car down again so we're at the right temperature, and then load up the clear, which is Balsac we use, the new one, marvellous lacquer. That's a 2-to-1 product with a 10% reducer in it, which is thinners. Come in, do the same again, a drop coat of that, so it's like a grip coat, so the lacquer's got something to hold on to straight away. Leave that 10 minutes, because it won't take much to let it flash off. Come back in, bang the first wet coat on, but go around all the little bits first, all around the edges, in the door shuts. Do them first, let that dry for 10 minutes, come in, smash on a full wet coat over the whole lot. Pray that you ain't gonna get runs, which this time we didn't. And then yeah, so then leave that 15 minutes, come back in again, Smash the last coat on, that's the one that always gives me like the heart flutter, because you just want it to be mint. And that's it. Let it flash off for 20 minutes, then put it on a full bake cycle for 40 minutes, and that virtually makes it cure straight away. But I like to come in again this morning, banged it on another 40 degrees cycle again for 20 minutes, and now it's like proper gone off. You want to give it about a couple of days till you start wet flattening and polishing it, but we'll probably do that next week, start doing that next week, because today I've got some colour samples to do for the E-Type Jag, the convertible one, and then I'm going to smash on with the bonnet and the doors. The boot lid, I think we've just got to do something else to that, and that's it. That's paint complete on this. So yeah, so I think the lads have been doing stuff on the Allegro side skirts. So Steve's been next door fitting them up, just doing the last bit of prep so we can get them into matte black. Gaz is doing some refinishing work, like bead blasting little bits for this, like the hinges, getting stuff ready. He's done a list of all new parts it needs, like all the little fasteners and stuff like that, nuts, bolts, door handles. We're just pricing it up to what it costs to get it refurbed. So yeah, busy week so far. So I'll leave it at that. Jamie's probably going to show you a bit more of what we've done, and I'll see you next week.
Well, thank you for that, Mark. And at that point, we're going to hand over and go into the assembly shop with Cal and see what's going on in there, because there's quite a lot going on in there as well. We've had visitors there too.
Thank you very much, Nat. And you find me in front of this rather striking looking Allegro. And actually, quite excitingly, we have one of the seats. Obviously, we saw the trim being done quite a while ago, but the owner came over the other day and just did a quick trial sit in it with everything as it will be in its final guise. So we've got a seat in there, and I have to say, I can't wait to see it all done, because that seat colour combo, it just works so well. The whole lot is just ridiculously 70s. And we've got the side skirts coming together, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing those in their final black form, because the thinking with the side skirts was always, along with the front splitter, but was always on the side skirts to do it black, to kind of visually slim the car this way, because we wanted to deepen it so that we could basically create the illusion of the car looking fairly low, but without compromising suspension travel too much. And this is a trick we've done on a couple of cars in the past as well, but if you can then visually slim it this way, it then looks less deep vertically. So that'll be black, and then there's going to be a little bit of black kind of stone chip protection vinyl on the rear arch, like a flick up on the arch that kind of almost looks like a continuation of the skirt. But yes, as you saw I think last week, Nat finished moulding the skirts, the guys have been fettling them. They've then been doing the fit up of the skirts. George was involved with that. We were just 3D printing some spacers just to get the positions exactly right. When we were doing these, because the chances of getting like both cars literally millimetre perfect one to the other, we basically averaged things out and left a kind of panel gap space around the skirt design, so that we didn't end up with like minute discrepancies in the fitment. So we've just been doing the spacers to basically sit them perfectly. Once we're happy with that, which I think I am on this car, we've got to do them on the other car that's behind you on the ramp, the orange car. We will then get those painted satin black, and they can go on for the final time. So very excited to see that final look there. And in here we have every car person's excitement moment of putting throttle bodies onto a 4-cylinder engine and standing back and going, "Wow, that looks awesome," which it does. So Anthony's been getting the throttle bodies onto here for the final time, I believe, and then I think James is going to move on to designing the little vacuum manifold that we're going to have on here, that will have the idle control valve on it, the feed out to the servo, and the little vacuum bleeds that we did these spacers here for will feed to that. So getting that design fabricated, mounted in place. And then also engine related, Anthony's been doing the battery cabling that runs from the alternator to the starter and working on the mounting studs that are going to mount that under the throttle bodies. He's been laying that out on the other engine, which is in the engine build room. And on the subject of that other engine, I probably mentioned last week that James has been building that engine, which is now completed doing. And rather than me yap on yet again about building a VTEC engine, let's show a little montage of that happening right now. Right, I hope you enjoyed that little montage. That's 2 montages in one episode. Quick mentions, the Sierra Cosworth, which I think we've showed kind of in the final stages of paint last week. Client came over to look at that today, absolutely blown away, can't wait to pick it up. So I think next week that will be going, so he can crack on with the build work on that. And then Project Churchill over there, we showed last week the final stages of sort of testing and tweaking the components that are going to be 3D printed for the door cards. Well, Luke's now moved on to sectioning all that lot up, ready to print it in-house, and that's printing right now on the Bamboo Labs printer we've got up there. What's actually very cool, and we should show more of this, is that those printers actually save time-lapse footage of everything that we print. So I might just stick in some footage now of hopefully those components or some components being printed. And in fact, actually, we don't have to put up footage of random things being 3D printed, because I have just remembered we've been 3D printing all the sections for the Allegro dash. Now, I think we showed that last week, but this week George has been bonding all those sections together and bonding them onto the metal framework. So the next step with that is we're going to hand that over to the bodywork guys to just smooth that out, and then that will be ready for Richard to do the upholstery on. Project Churchill over there. Nat's already talked about the frames on the rear windows. Adam has been on with the engine build, carrying on, so all the timing cover arrangements on there now, the water pumps on there, crank sensors on there, getting perilously close to time to get the cylinder head on. And that is exciting because we've already got the gearbox, which I was scanning around to see where it is, but just behind Jamie, the auto transmission for that is ready to go. So actually, once the head's on that engine, I think we're pretty much into a position where the engine and box can go straight into the car. So yeah, super exciting that there's multiple angles of attack on that, with interior components going together, which means Richard can then do the back seat upholstery, he can do the rear card upholstery, he can start looking at the centre console, he can do the rear parcel shelf. Nat's finishing the window frames, which is the last bit of exterior trim, I think. Possibly with the exception of the grille and rear tail light and surrounds, actually, which we need to then do all the copper plating on that. And then with the engine going together, hopefully we're not far off engine and transmission. So it'll be quite a nice period of transformative progress on that car, which is exciting. I think on that note, I know the guys in the CAD lair have been beavering away, but I think actually it's going to make more sense to show what they've been up to next week. We'll also catch up next week on what's been going on at the den. I would have done it this week, but I'm aware this episode is actually turning into a bit of a behemoth, so let's do that one next week. In the meantime, there's merch in the shop. I think the hoodies have actually sold out now, but there are t-shirts. I'm positively thinking summer's just around the corner, so get on the shop. There's Den t-shirts, there's Retro Power t-shirts, loads of all the usual stuff, mugs, coffee, beanies. I don't think we've put the trucker caps on there. There might be Den trucker caps on there as well. We will follow with Retro Power ones soon as well. So yeah, get in the merch shop. And also don't forget we now have our podcast series, which I think the first proper episode of, which we dropped on Wednesday, was talking to Richard Brunning from Bad Obsession Motorsport about Project Binky. That one seems to have gone down quite well. This Wednesday we should be talking to Ollie Clark from Roger Clark Motorsport, which will be really interesting actually. They're kind of the pride of Hinckley, being a local company to us here in Hinckley in the Midlands. So yeah, look forward to that on Wednesday, and we will see you for another uncut in the Retro Power Workshop next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.